We've just discussed limits to certain points, but now we're going to talk about limits to infinity. So we're going to discuss the behavior of f of x equals 2 minus x over 1 plus x near its asymptotes. So remember, these lines here on the dotted, these are our asymptotes. So they're not actually part of the graph, but they're the invisible wall that the graph is trying to cross but can never actually do. And we're going to use the behavior of these asymptotes in the graph in order to deduce the equation of the asymptotes. So the first thing we need to look at is we need to look at x as it approaches -1 from the left. So this little thing up here tells us that we're approaching from the left. So this little one means from the left. So it means we want to look at the left of -1 and we want to see what's happening to our graph. So we can see that our graph, as we're approaching -1 from our left, our graph is going down to -infinity. So f of x, our y value, is approaching -infinity. As we approach x is -1 from the right, so this guy here means right, so we look at our graph and now we want to be on the right side of -1, and we can see here that our graph is approaching positive infinity. So our y values are going to positive infinity. But we have this other sort of asymptote to look at, and that's what happens when x approaches infinity. So the other thing we need to look at, we need to see as x approaches -infinity. Let me just grab a different color here. So we're approaching -infinity on the x. We want to know what's happening to the y. So we can see as we approach infinity, as we're going off to the left here, we're getting closer and closer to this -1. So our y values are getting closer to -1, and we're on the left side of -1. So we're underneath -1. So again, this little thing here means left. As we move to the other side and we start making x go to positive infinity, so that's looking over here, we can see that f of x is decreasing to -1, but from the right. So we're above -1 this time on the y. So this guy means right. So this tells us a little bit about our asymptotes. This tells us that one of our asymptotes, our vertical asymptote, is at x equals -1. That's why when we are approaching -1, our graph goes off into infinity. It also tells us that we have a horizontal asymptote at y equals -1. Because as x tries to go off to infinity, that's the y value that we hit. We can also find our vertical asymptote by looking at our equation. So don't forget, you can always find your vertical asymptote by setting 1 plus x equal to 0. So we get that x equals -1. So we can either use our limits in our graph in order to find it, or we can find it algebraically.